And so we return and begin again. Welcome to the Invisible Podcast, issuesode 9. I'm Bob Z, and we are going cover issue by issue, page by page, theory by theory, panel by panel, blah blah blah, who by cares, through Grant Morrison's 90s-ish cosmic comic conspiracy classic, The Invisibles. We're on to issue 9, and let's do our beginning, which is, as always, the solidity test, the sturdiness test. Good issue, good and strong. Hell of a cover by Sean Phillips. Yeah, very good binding, everything's fine. Hell of a cover, pardon me, by Sean Phillips. Really good. Guys, I hate to get into it so soon. Oh, wow, do you know what? I've literally, with all my shaking, dislodged the spine. Ha! Not quite as resilient as we thought, are you, Invisibles number 9? Anyway, never mind. Things fall apart. Ooh! I don't normally do it this early, but guys, there's a lot going on this cover. Let's go through the elements one by one. Lovely Sean Phillips art, as you'd expect. King Mob going with a submachine gun. Brilliant, like, muzzle flashes across the centre. Kind of like really cutting and drawing to your eye the composition of the page. After the past few issues, which, let's be honest, they've been quite heavy going, haven't they? This one is really, this cover especially, is really yelling at you to pay attention when you see it there on the shelves in the comic shop or your local newsagent. And it's doing a great job in that kind of regard. You've got the orange and the red framing the blue. Check it out here. That's Dane's hand with his pinky cut off that Orlando cut off him in the last issue. We've got King Mob, who kind of, and this is the first time he's been on the cover of the comic. He looks like Action Man or something. He's got his shades on. It's weird that, kind of, given that he's like the Han Solo of the story, that it's taken him this long to get on the cover, but he is really coming correct on this cover. Like, I mean, honestly, the way that Sean Phillips has just kind of cut these muzzle flashes out to make them kind of stand at strange angles to each other relatively is really brilliant. And then we get into the title, which is really interesting in and of itself. It says 23 Things Fall Apart, and we have a picture of a Yijing hexagram here. Splitting apart, things fall apart, as it's been kind of somewhat crudely translated here for obvious reasons. We'll get to those. Is not that hexagram. You see, I'll hold it nice and close to the camera so you can see. So that hexagram that we've got here, that's hexagram number 27, which is E, or nourishment. If you tip it on its side, it becomes a bit more easy to think about as a mouth, which is what hexagram 27 is. So it's something, it's a mouth, something needing feeding, something getting fedded. 23, hexagram 23. If you imagine that the first line here, the bottom line, is open instead of closed. It's another half line, another broken line. That would be number 23, and that would be giving you the impression of something that's kind of was once solid, splitting apart. Yeah, look at it from that way. But was something that was once solid, having been split down its centre, splitting apart. Kind of in the sense that you would, split a twig or split the bough of a tree to take a transplant, or to just to cut it off, just to kind of cut off one bit of the tree to let it die. And another one, and the other half of the tree, the bit that's left uncut, if you like, the bit that's still unsevered, goes on to live and in fact gets stronger. We then understand that when this hexagram, now this is a mistake. Let's not be crazy. This is probably a mistake. This is probably just Sean Phillips or whoever was responsible for designing this bit of the page, getting it wrong. However, it's not that much of a mistake. And obviously, because this is an oblique strategic podcast, we are not going to blame anybody for this. We are going to say that this is, in fact, a hidden intent. So what we understand is that first line is quite plausible within the framework of the I Ching, like a dynamic broken line upon being thrown, which means one of the kind of modalities that's built into the I Ching is that, like, some of the lines, you construct each hexagram out of these 6 lines, some of them have the capacity to break or to dynamically shift so that the hexagram you pull can quickly transform into another one, which kind of is a very useful thing because it has introduces an unpredictability, like a chaotic switching element into the structure of the oracle. That's a bit like life, which is unpredictable and dynamic as well. So it gives the I Ching an extra complexity, which makes it, which gives it that, oh, I'm actually talking to an alien intelligence and which knows the future vibe. Other divination processes are available, but the I Ching definitely feels like you're just talking to not necessarily God, but something he knows what God's up to, and is going to tell you in very clear, plain language. If you've kind of got the guts, I suppose, to take what it's saying on, to just kind of believe in it, to just kind of realise that it is telling you the truth, and whatever you may think about how no, that's not it, you're wrong. The I Ching tends to know. So we have 23, which is splitting apart, and that's phased into 27, nourishment. Now, there's not much nourishment in this issue. There's 2 points where nourishment kind of maybe comes up. We'll get to the first one in just a minute. But the other one, we'll get to the second one in just a minute. But the other one, the breaking one, is this here, right? The nourishment that we've seen, this mouth is referring to this little bit of Dane's pinky here. Remember how Orlando scarfed it down? That's the mouth. That's the nourishment. Or at least that's one pretty good read of what the nourishment-seeking mouth is in hexagram 27. As I say, like, hexagram 23 is normally translated as splitting apart, rather than, or just splitting, in fact, rather than things fall apart. The word things fall apart is obviously coming from Yeats, and we're going to get to that. We'll get to that when we get to the title page. Let's get into the issue, because we don't normally spend this long on the cover. But yeah, Dane's hand, eating, sacrifice, blood, offerings, mouth versus splitting. Generally, like, this issue is about the band breaking up. Yeah, you know how we've been talking about all of these like French salons and all these kind of like invisible cells embedded through history. Like, definitely one of the thoughts that was current at the time. Oh, do you know what? I've just noticed that I think the red background that all of the sidebar and the title is cut out of, I think that's a real extreme close-up of the lines on Dane's hand. So you can probably read the future by looking closely at Dane's hands if you didn't have this bold nutcase going ape shit with an AK on it like that in the way. It's not an AK, sorry. Where was I? I don't know. Over the page. Can I remember where I was before I interrupted myself? I don't think I can. I don't think I can. No, I can't. Maybe it'll come to me. Inside the front page, we have an advert, an annoyingly black and white advert for the Garth Ennis and Phil Winslade comic Goddess. Earth-shaking, bone-breaking, mind-shattering. I've remembered what it was. And that's when she's in a good mood. 8 issues of running gunfights and unrequited love, beginning in April from Vertigo. Lovely, big, chunky Phil Winslade kind of painty art there from the Fabry Bisley school, really. I haven't read Goddess for a long time, if ever, all the way through, to be honest. But, you know, Irish woman, inhabited by the spirit of like an ancient Celtic death goddess, fighting the CIA for 8 issues, with a kind of a hapless, schlubby, I think Irish guy, maybe not, kind of going along for the ride. I think I'm just going to take a guess at this, because like I say, I haven't read it for a long time, but I think maybe she gets a period, and it gives her special powers, which isn't irrelevant entirely to this issue. But yeah, it's about the goddess. God bless her. Goddess bless herself. I wouldn't mind reading it. I bet it's got some good fights in it. You can always trust Garth Ennis for that. And let's kind of maybe think about the rest of this issue through the lens of, well, not just the goddess, but an earth-shaking, bone-breaking, mind-shattering version of what the goddess is. The thing that I'd forgotten, that I remembered again, all of the French salons, all of the invisible cells scattered throughout history, there was a definite sense, cheeky and dumb though it was, that like pop groups were the new version of that. So the things fall apart, or the splitting apart, is like breaking up the band. and which is what happens in this issue. Okay, right, but that's it. Right, let's get into it. Let's get into it properly. I may have said it before, but this is going to be a quick issue to read and a quick issue-sode of the podcast. Okay, I promise. Thanks for bearing with over the last few epically long issue-sodes. But this one has got a real pace to it. You know, the Arcadia storyline got so kind of stuck into itself that it did nearly tank the comic, frankly. You know, sales tipped right off, and you could tell that Morrison was almost like aware of the kind of the millstone that he put around his own neck towards the end of it. This episode, it's got such a different change of pace, and it kind of splits open the somewhat stodgy thing that the last 4 issues of the Invisibles had become, and had kind of made the entire series become, retrospectively colouring the previous issues a bit as well. This one throws you right back into guns and mayhem, and is very welcome, but also just the way that it's constructed, just the storytelling, just the comic book techniques, and the pace, just the rhythm. It's amazing that Morrison can write these different rhythms. Actually, it's really speaks well to his abilities as a comic book writer. The rhythm and the speed of this is a complete contrast, a complete split from what has come before. And it's a really fast read, and it's really exciting. And that's not to say there isn't a lot that we can get stuck into here. Plenty of rabbit holes, plenty of little twists around the rhizome. But we're going to try and keep it brief. And I know that I say that every week, every episode, and I mean it. And I've already wasted about 10 minutes just explaining how this issue-sode is going to be the shortest one yet. So let's get on with it. We're in, okay, opening caption, opening page. Philadelphia, September 1992. So what? So this is 3-4 years before... It's a flashback. 3 or 4 years before where we are now. We've got King Mob and a guy who we discover is John O'Dreams. Hanging out in this church in the city of Philadelphia. Now this here, that's One Liberty Place. That's like the biggest skyscraper, and kind of like the first skyscraper in sort of downtown central Philadelphia. Philadelphia for a long time, because it's kind of got this like ye olde American history thing. For a long time it had this like ordinance about not having skyscrapers. So it had like a kind of it was a low American city for a long time. But One Liberty Place smashed that ceiling quite literally, and became this somewhat kind of mannered deco thing. It's obviously meant to be trying to be the Philadelphia Chrysler Building, but having been built in like 1989 rather than 1929, it's got this kind of slightly pre-molded feel to it. It feels a bit more kind of poured rather than arted, if you know what I mean. So it doesn't it's not a terribly nice feeling building. But this church that we're in, I'm pretty sure that this is I've written it down just so I don't forget, it's the Arch Street United Methodist Church on North Broad Street. It's on the corner of like Broad and Arch, but that steeple is pretty well recognisable, I think, as belonging to the Arch Street United Methodist Church. These days it's a super woke church with all, pride banners and stuff, so that's cool. I'm not sure if that's what it looks like inside. I'm guessing not, but I'm pretty sure that's if there's a real life location that this church is based on, then it's almost certainly that one. It's all of the cues are right. The poetry is right. We'll get to that, but the cues are right. You can basically see One Liberty Place from that church and from the street outside that church and vice versa. They're very near each other. They're only a 4 or 5 minute walk, and they're both quite tall, so you can kind of see them. But yeah, they're inside there. Like I say, I don't know if the interior is authentic or not, but it doesn't really matter, because they're just kind of, by now we're just going for a creepy gothic Catholic church vibe. King Mob, I think it's King Mob. Yeah, King Mob says, nice, they've crucified a toad, poor little bastard. And then John O'Dreams says it's Tsathojua's totem, Sathogua, Zathorhua. Don't know how you pronounce it. Tsathoggua is like the toad god, yeah, from the Cthulhu mythos, invented by Clark Ashton Smith in 1920. I wrote this down. I didn't write it down. It's Clark Ashton Smith, 1924. Oh yeah, I did. Sorry, 1929, which is the second time that word has popped up today. The Tale of Satangra Zeros. The tale? Yeah, the Tale of Satangra Zeros. It would be really good if I wrote my notes well enough to be able to read them after, but I haven't done that. I'm really sorry that you have to bear with my idiocy. Where are we going with this? It's Tsathoggua. He's like a kind of an amorphous jelly being. He later cropped up in The Whisperer in the Darkness, is it? No, that's later. He does crop up in... He was invented by Clark Ashton Smith, but I think in print he appeared in a Lovecraft story, just as a kind of like a little side mention in that Lovecraftian way. Clark Ashton Smith was like a Californian buddy of Lovecraft's. They corresponded a lot. Obviously, you know, everyone knows Lovecraft had this very wide correspondence circle. His buddies and him all swapped, motifs and like funky, scary, horror, fantasy-sounding names. We discussed this when we were talking about Crom Cruach in issuesode 2 or 3, I think. Robert E. Howard, who did Crom, and the Crom Cruach is real, obviously, but the way that he features in Lovecraft isn't real. Crom's, Robert Howard's Conan novels all happen in the same as the Lovecraft, Cthulhu mythos universe. So Tsathoggua is like a later toady version of this. He's basically like a kind of an amorphous jelly, a bit like frog spawn, if you like, that actually kind of just like goes and takes on a froggy form, and therefore he's kind of like a frog totem. Lovecraft kind of took a lot of the multi-theriomorphic-ness of it and made it just more toady. Toads are obviously a symbol of Hecate. They're also a symbol of the voltigeur, right? Okay, so this is John of Dreams again. He says it's Tsathoggua totem. They want us to know they're using the hand in conjunction with the formula of the voltigeur to open the fracture onto universe B. We have to stop this. Okay, man, there's a lot going on there. So it's only a spoiler for a few pages hence. So the hand that he's talking about is called the Hand of Glory. Hand of Glory is like a magical totem that you make from the hand of a condemned and executed murderer. It's used to put people to sleep, famously in The Wicker Man, and we'll get to that. Not today. We'll get to that, though. In The Wicker Man, it's a thing that's going to pop up a lot in The Invisibles. It's like a plot MacGuffin, right? It's not the first time it's cropped up. That cropped up also in issue 3, maybe issue 4, when Dane and Tom are at St Dunstan's in the east, and they're swinging on the swings, and they see a couple of people come up to the sort of walking past. The people who are walking past are talking about the Hand of Glory, and this is the Hand of Glory now that we're talking about here. They're using the hand in conjunction with the formula of the voltigeur to open the fracture onto universe B. Okay, the formula of the voltigeur refers to like Kenneth Grant stroke Michel Bertillot voodoo-ish thelema, yeah? So it's like Typhonian thelema crossed with a little bit of like somewhat misappropriated voodoo to kind of go into this voodoo Gnostic thing that we talked about when we talked about the Ontic Supersphere, an issuesode or 2 ago. Michel Bertillot's stuff. Morrison was well into Michel Bertillot and his kind of like controversial, scary voodoo Gnostic workbook, which was doing the rounds at the time. Was like for the cool guys at the time. Crikey, where do you start with all that? Basically, this is a dirty joke. The formula of the voltigeur involves mixing semen with menstrual excretions, menstrual blood, but different phases of it depending on how far along the woman's period is, right? And then drinking it, sharing it, mouth to mouth kind of thing. And the Hand of Glory, obviously, it sounds a bit like the Whole of Glory. It's like this is so much of the Kenneth Grant, Michel Bertillot stuff is like sex magic, and kind of is like, you don't have sex with a woman on her period. It's like, dudes, come on. So this is kind of like an allusion to that. That glory, yeah, the hand, that, yeah, it's basically mucky stuff. It's basically hands of glories, glory holes, menstrual blood, jizzing. We're having a cracking laugh. And this kind of sex magic can apparently open the fracture onto Universe B. So if you read that closely, it implies that there's a fracture somewhere onto Universe B, and that this formula of the Voltigeur, which is, you've got the three pillars of the Kabbalah, of the tree of life, the two like Masonic pillars of severity and mercy on either side, which are kind of traversed by the central pillar, which goes up through the center of the human nervous system. You've got those three pillars, and then the formula of the Voltigeur sort of crosses them. Yeah. So, and these are like tunnels underlaying the three pillars of the cross. So it's like three pillars with a cross kind of over it. I should have probably got a picture and show you, shouldn't I? It looks a bit like this. So not entirely unlike the Union Jack or something, but that's basically the formula of the Voltigeur. The Voltigeur, right, it gets interesting here, guys. I'm sorry to say, you might disagree, but it really does. So the Voltigeur in kind of Haitian-derived voodoo via Berthiaud and his cult, Le Couleur Noire, the black circle, the cult of the black snake. It's they like all of this stuff is a bit kind of made on the hoof, and it's kind of fallen out of fashion recently. And it's kind of daft, and when you read it, you're like, this is not really very sane or sensible seeming, but it's cool. It's a laugh. Like, what your cult's called the cult of the black snake, that's pretty cool. Well, actually, it's called Le Couleur Noire, and it's like, well, that's even cooler. Sorry. The Voltigeur within that mythos, that scheme, that magical model. The Voltigeur are like the toads are their symbols because toads jump, yeah, frogs, they leap. And volt means to vault, to leap, from the French, via Haiti, yeah. And sorry, I'm a bit like under attack from insects because it's one of those very rare days in Britain when it's warm, and so nights in fact, and so the window's open but the lights are on, and so the bugs are coming in. So I might be like waving my hands around and slapping my face even more so than usual. So please bear with me. The frogs, the Voltigeurs, you go through the sphere of Darth in the Kabbalistic tree of life, onto the other side of the tree, which is like the dark side. You could think of it as being either the shadow of the tree. That's kind of useful in the way that like the branches of the shadows of the tree will overlap and seem to become the same thing, allowing you to get from one branch to another in a leap that wouldn't be possible on a linear scheme, right? You might also want to think of it as being like the reverse of the tree of life, which you get to again through Darth. This kind of like like the evil sphere, if you like. Another way of thinking about it is like as if it's the roots of the tree. So how like a tree is basically the same thing above ground as it is below ground, but below ground it's even more complicated. The branches are smaller and even more complex, and they're called roots, and they overlap. But a tree is basically, we see the top half of it, and the bottom half is like an iceberg. We don't see it, but it's even bigger and kind of more complex and overlaps and curls into itself a lot more. So whichever metaphor you use, the opposite side of the tree necessarily crosses over itself. It doesn't have these separated pathways like the kind of the positive front side of the tree does. When these pathways are the ones which link up the three pillars with the spheres going over it. Get a book on Kabbalah and look that stuff up. Don't even get a book, just Google it, and look at the paths and stuff. The Berthiaud Grant axis is kind of, they're like spooky dudes, right? So they look at the evil side of the tree of life. Now you get to the evil side by going through Darth, as I keep saying, which is kind of like cognate with the abyss, yeah, like the existential abyss, like staring into the abyss, like Nietzsche, the abyss. Or another type of abyss that you get is a woman's vagina, another one that you get, which is like super abyssy, is one which is menstruating, right? So you go through or into that, you come out the other side, and suddenly you're in like the dark side, the evil side, the shadow side, or the root side of the tree of life. And when you're in there, rather than having to kind of move between these spheres in a somewhat structured way, you could leap from one bit of it to another. And voltigeurs are toad-like avatar men. Yeah, you do astral projection. You take on a non-human theriomorphic form, so like a wolf or something, or maybe a frog if you're a bit more advanced, and you can kind of, by doing so, you become scary enough to scare off any minor demons that are going to mess with you when you get onto that slightly hinky side of the astral plane. And once you're there, you could get to different negative aspect, like basically the negative or the shell-like side of existence is more overlapping and wrapped up and curled into itself than the day side, and the side that we kind of live in, if you like, the kind of the normal side. Sorry to normalize things with my poor language. But the voltigeur can leap very quickly from one aspect of existence in this negative-ish realm, with leaps, and it's disruptive, and situations change very quickly, and frames of mind change very quickly from bad to worse, basically. But the voltigeur can leap into these kind of like dark headspaces or psychic spaces freely, and hence the toad or the frog is their icon, is their kind of like image, is their symbol. Why are they called the voltigeurs though? Where'd you get that name from? So, voltigeurs, again, this comes via Haiti, so you've got to think about French troops in Haiti, yeah? But, not nice ones. Doing bad stuff in Haiti, doing bad colony stuff. The voltigeurs were like an elite skirmishing unit in the Le Grande Armée, in Napoleon Bonaparte's like badass army, right? They were the like well-trained shock troops, and they were called the voltigeurs. This is so cool because they would basically go to they'd be the normal cavalry would be charging into battle, and the voltigeurs would jump onto the horses as they were running past, hold on to them, and then jump off again when the horses had taken them further into battle, so they could advance into the battle lines much more quickly than anyone else could. Obviously, even though they were trained to do that, it doesn't work. You can't jump onto the back of a galloping horse. Well, you can, but you're going to break your leg as well. So the voltigeurs, despite their kind of fancy name, they basically became like a skirmishing, fast reaction, shock troopy kind of unit or units within Napoleon's army. So they were kind of badass, and they were Napoleonic. And it's weird that we've only just come out of a very in-depth discussion of the Marquis de Sade, French Enlightenment, Jacobite, Masonic stuff in the French Revolution, and then on the first page of the next issue, we're back there, but a bit further on down the timeline. We're almost exactly on the timeline, a couple of years before maybe, where Byron and Shelley were. So so there was like 20 years between the 25, 27 years between the revolutionary period of France with everyone getting their head cut off, and Byron and Shelley in northern Italy doing their thing. So we're back there with that with a word. So we're still in some regard thinking about the development of the French state, which kind of Bonaparte was like a really weird guy, like a kind of a Hitler who wasn't really evil. Kind of like nasty in loads of ways, obviously, but not genocidal or whatever, and basically kind of more responsible than anyone for making Europe shut up and adopt certain like shared, not just kind of cultural, but like civic practices, and kind of making the modern state, for all of its faults, it's better than the pre-modern state, like it is, yeah? Like all of these models of like jurisprudence and civics and government and like civic infrastructure, Bonaparte did kind of all of it, and just because he was arsey and was sick of all these like inbreds like ruining the world, so we kind of like him with caveats, obviously. After all, anyone who the English hate that much has got to have something going for him, right? Except for Hitler again. But yeah, it's just weird that we're back in like post-revolutionary kind of era France, right? We're just back in that time again, just at the point where we thought we were going to split away from it. Great. So we've been going for about half an hour, and we've done 3 panels. So I'm sorry about my inevitable, obvious lie about this not being, blah blah blah, the shortest one ever or whatever. So John, who's wearing this white suit here, he looks like a kind of looks like a bit of a sort of he's a bit too young, but he looks like a cross between like, I don't know, he looks like a kind of like a 60s Nehru jacket kind of apple core kind of guy, right? Not quite one of the Beatles, but one of their posh hangers-on, something like that. Yeah, and he's a bit creepy. But he's friends with King Mob, who we like. King Mob's it's nice. This is like a younger version of King Mob, and he's not quite in the fetish gear here, but he is wearing like a bomber jacket. He's got kind of like docks on. He's got a very tight crew cut, which could even be maybe could be a suede head, like his skinhead is growing out. Almost like he was a skinhead, then he got out of it for a while, and then he went back into it, like where he is now. But this is like much more like a classic skin look with the bomber jacket, the kind of the militant hooligan vibe. Much more like a character out of a Stuart Home novel. We mentioned Stuart Home a little bit of a while back as well, I think, didn't we? But the two of them, they're investigating stuff in a creepy church. It's brilliant. It's like it's a proper dream come true, isn't it? What an adventure. King Mob says, Christ, I'll be a lot happier if we can just find something to shoot, because obviously they're doing magic stuff, but also that's what we call dramatic foreshadowing, because the rest of the issue is basically him shooting things. And then we're over onto the title page. They go through a doorway in this creepy church, and we're over onto the title page. My God, it's magnificent. Oh Christ, bloody mighty, they've done it. My God, it's magnificent. John of Dreams has got quite a creepy look on his eye. John of Dreams comes from Hamlet. It basically means, a dreamy guy, a guy who's away in his dreams, a guy who's lost in dreamland, a daydreamer. And we're on to the title page, 23, Things Fall Apart. Let's do the credits. Grant Morrison, writer. Jill Thompson, pencils. Dennis Kramer on inks. Daniel Vozzo doing the colours. Clem Robbins doing the letters. Julie Rottenberg, the associate editor. Stuart Moore, the editor. And the Invisibles are created by Grant Morrison. And the title of the issue, again, 23, Things Fall Apart. And the mistaken hexagram is repeated. So, again, we're seeing 27. We're seeing the mouth. We're not seeing the splitting. I kind of guess I need to, because it is right there, slap bang, I kind of need to talk about the 23 thing right now. I kind of don't want to, because I'm sure you've been there and done it. But so the 23 enigma, the 23 thing, the number 23 is like a magic number. It was first kind of mentioned by William Burroughs in his journals or one of his novels. I'm not quite sure where, maybe just an article. In the late 50s, Captain Clark on board the flight number 23. A guy says, "I've flown for 23 years and never had so much as a spot of turbulence." And then it's 23 years, flight 23. That night, which was like the 23rd of the month or whatever, his plane crashes and kills 23 people on board. That's kind of the thing, is that Burroughs kind of heard this weird story, and it stuck with him because of its synchronicitous nature. Then he started to notice 23s falling apart. Falling apart. He started to notice 23s falling into his lap, kind of at moments of significance, of moments of interest, moments moments where the veil is perhaps a little bit thinner, moments where you should perhaps pay a little bit more attention than you otherwise might. This was picked up on by Robert Anton Wilson in all of the Illuminatus era, specifically the Illuminatus trilogy, but also that Illuminatus era stuff that we know informs so much of the Invisibles. Basically, the 23 thing, it's a kind of a warning not to get sucked too deep into apophenia. I think it is apophenia rather than pareidolia. Pattern forming, basically. It does this cool thing. You start to pay attention to 23s and you see more of them. and it teaches you that the universe is real out there because there are 23s that were there, and you can. It's easy to prove objectively that those numbers were there before you were there to look at them, and yet the more you look at them, the more they appear. So it's this useful kind of like it's this useful sort of like mental mnemonic, basically, for collapsing the subject-object distinction quickly and frequently. It throws you into a state of ontological dissonance where you're not quite sure if the universe is basically a load of coincidences which are arranging themselves for the purposes of your consciousness to observe them, or if it's just really there and you're just a mind that spots things that it wants to spot. And it's a useful way, and you can rotate through those two positions. The world is real. No, it's not. I'm just making it with my brain. It takes you into that kind of like dialectical non-resolution. The really interesting part of it, the part that you should probably remember more than like the it's all a load of rubbish part, which is kind of the throwing your hands into the air natural response that you get after you've been looking at this stuff for a little while. It's important to just remember the weird side. You already know that the world is kind of objectively there. That's kind of, that's just obvious. You just tap on the thing to remind yourself that it's there. What is easy to forget and shouldn't be forgotten is that is the side of the 23 enigma which says, is the 3 rather than the 2, I guess, that says, no, the world is unstable and weird, and you're literally making it with your brain. And both of those positions are true, but one of them is much more interesting than the other one, right? Like the 3 is more interesting than the 2. The world isn't stable and fixed. A bit of it, at least, and maybe all of it, is being generated by the power of your mind. That's magic. It's utterly real. The 23 enigma, if you study it for any length of time, will show you that it's real in a way which makes you go, whoa, I definitely at least half believe that. And that's, I believe it of a ratio of 3 to 2. And that's a good, healthy ratio to have. Like, you are creating the world through the action of you looking at it and having a conscious function to process the universe into existence. The universe wants you to do that, and it loves it if you're aware of it. So do hold on to that. So that's what the number 23 is about. You could literally talk about it forever. It is kind of dumb and interesting and fun. But it's a bit cringe as well. It's a bit played out, isn't it? You know what I mean? It is, isn't it? So we're not going to dwell on that for any longer than we have. I think we'll come up against it a lot. There's a lot of 23s in the Invisibles, and it kind of, it's a bit annoying when somebody's making a comic and like deliberately packing them with it. It's like, that kind of damages the randomness of it, and therefore damages the story. Right? Yeah. We'll get to that. We'll do more 23 stuff in the future. The other half of the title, so we've got hexagram 27, the number 23, and then the title, Things Fall Apart, which, as I've said, is not a great translation of splitting apart, or just splitting, that the 23 hexagram is usually translated as. What do we say about this? So Things Fall Apart it's a reference. It's a reference, isn't it? Yeah, it's a reference. What's it a reference to? So Things Fall Apart is like a 1958 novel by Chinua Achebe. It's like a classic of post-colonial literature. I haven't read it for a very long time, and I'll be honest with you, I only read about half of it because it was one of those weeks at university, wasn't it, where you had a lot of books to read. So I didn't finish it. But it's useful for the way that we might think about the voodoo stuff on the last page not being all that okay. Neither is the project of being a white guy doing anything in colonial territory. Okay, it's a useful reminder of decolonizing some of the way that we think about the cultural manifestations that we produce for ourselves to show who we are in the world. Decolonize them. Chinua Achebe was taking his name from The Second Coming, right? Yeats's 1919 poem, "What rough beast slouches towards Bethlehem to be born?" We're going to meet the rough beast slouching towards Bethlehem in 2 issues' time. But for the moment, we've just got this oblique reference to in the widening gyre, the centre cannot hold, things fall apart. Now that's really interesting. I don't quite know how to jump into this, but we're going to jump in. Okay, we're going to jump in through Yeats. Right, okay, let's go back to the first page. The first word that we have that isn't the caption telling you where you are on the previous page, on page 1, is the word honey. And we've got this kind of narration happening while it's kind of got a slightly monstrous, kind of like creepy sound, while John and Mob are investigating the church. There's this parallel caption describe like while all this is going on, and it's going, honey, honey, tell them about the honey, mummy. Golden and rotten, sticky sweet honey. Both of them, it's describing honey kind of in the way that it looks and tastes, but both guys go, what's that smell? So what we're talking about here is the smell of honey. Sugary drip, golden and rotten, sticky sweet honey. So it's not about taste of honey, which is a 58 kitchen sink angry young man drama by what's her name, Sheila Delaney, is it? Yeah, Sheila Delaney. I've never read that. Haven't even seen the film, but I have heard the Beatles song, and it's not one of the better ones, but it's still good because it's still them, and so it does intersect with the Invisibles there. But yeah, there appears to be some honey hovering over this scene of them underneath the church. Oh, I haven't even mentioned. Where do we get into this? Now I keep jumping all over the place. Things are falling apart. Things are splitting. Every theme that I try to go down, I find myself being pulled into a digression very quickly. I apologise if it makes for a terrible podcast listening experience, but also it's the way the comic is. It does it to you. So I'm sorry. There's a massive alien fungus shell in this chamber in the spooky church. It's a Lovecraftian thing. It could be an elder thing, as in from. Oh my goodness! It's easy when you don't write it down. It's easy to just like hold it in your head if you don't write it down. But I wrote it down, so I forgot. It's from the elder things come from what? The Mountains of Madness. But I don't think it is an elder thing. I think it's Amigo. I think it's from the Whisperer in the Darkness, which is 31. Amigo. Obviously, like Lovecraft wasn't above a pun and was super duper racist. So the Spanish word for friend is to him a disgusting alien race. Yeah. Migo. The wings and the fungal thing make it a bit more that. The description is basically a splicing of the descriptions that you have in the Lovecraft literature of an elder thing and a Migo, but the preponderance of fungusy stuff in this scene makes me think it's Amigo because elder things are less fungal. But yeah, oh my goodness, that's weird. There's an alien, mushroom beast there, alien, with wings and tentacles, and it's horrible, and it smells of honey. Do you remember the mushrooms from the Mushroom Planet from issue 3 when Tom and Dane were talking, and Dane was having his weird vision, and Tom told Dane the secret of cities? This is a bit like that, isn't it? It's difficult to know where. This is a bit like Terence McKenna as well. This is a bit like 90s trip mushroom theory, that like mushrooms, two things. One, mushrooms are basically responsible for making primates have language and higher cognitive task processing like that. It doesn't quite account for like why the cows didn't get cleverer, because all the animals eat the mushrooms. All the animals love getting fucked up. But more coolly, they come from space. Yeah, I think we've talked about this in previous issuesodes. So the spores get charged in the upper ionospheres of other planets. They leap into outer space like voltigeurs, and they travelled for squillions of years. They land on another planet. They're robust enough to survive and small enough to kind of not burn up on re-entry. They land in some mud. They grow into mushrooms. Animals eat the mushrooms, and they literally become one with the alien consciousness that's encoded within the molecules of the fungus, basically. And it tells us that's what psilocybin contact feels a bit like, and that's apparently where we get the ability to think from, the ability to think in the abstract from. It's a gift from the psilocybin mushrooms. Speaking of gifts from the psilocybin mushrooms, I'm sorry, this is also tangly. It's more tangly than this guy's face and his legs. These are massive. Also growing next to the alien fungus thing. John says they're just vehicles. They build them from earth plane matter to allow themselves some kind of physical presence here. That one obviously couldn't take the pressure. Elder things can take pressure. Migos, I don't think it said much about their ability to take pressure or not. So I think it is a Migo. That's what we're going with. This one, that one can take the pressure. So we've got. So this is a bit like the alien spore psilocybin thing I was just talking about, but a bit more sci-fi and evil. Spirits looking to get into our plane of existence, whether they're from another dimension or another planet, or whether that's a meaningful distinction. Need a body when they get here because they may be traveling as spirits or psychic projections like we've had in previous issues, and they need to build themselves a permanent physical body. That creates pressure. The pressure of a spirit inside matter is enough to blow matter into smithereens, perhaps. And if it's not kind of properly constituted, and that's sort of what we've got here. Then these are kind of like this. You get this in Zenith too, right? When the Nazis are created. It's an earlier Grant Morrison comic. The Nazis are creating superheroes because the bodies are strong enough that you can fit Cthulhu-esque Loigor spirits in them without the body exploding. So this is that, but a fungal construct body rather than a Superman construct body. There's all these massive magic mushrooms around in the room where they're growing the Migo. So maybe, yeah, I think the Spanish connection is relevant the more I think about it, for the mushroom thing. So you've got these massive psilocybin mushrooms in this room. Now they're called Liberty Cap mushrooms. In America anyway. We don't really call them that over here. And like the British local mushrooms look a teeny bit different. But these are Liberty Cap mushrooms. Now remember, this entire scene is taking place at Liberty Place. The Liberty Cap mushroom is called that because the Jacobins, the lads from the French Revolution, we're back there. Yeah, sorry, we are. Would wear Liberty Caps to mark each other out as membership of the gang and to show their commitment to liberty. They then kind of took to putting the caps on top of spikes and holding them aloft as like a standard bearer was they were like taking to the streets. And that symbol became a symbol of the American Revolution and therefore was minted on certain early American coins. And the first American coins were minted at the Philadelphia Mint, which is only about as far away from this church that the guys are in now as the church is from one Liberty Place. We're literally in Liberty Triangle here. There's Liberty stuff going on everywhere. Philadelphia was obviously the first capital of the United States of America. It's got loads of history kind of to that effect around there that's been carefully preserved. It's one of the few American cities which feels a little bit old. It feels not quite European, but it feels older in a way, like more than most American cities do, not in my limited experience. But we've got Liberty Place, we've got the Arch Street United Methodist Church, we've got the Philadelphia Mint just another couple of streets away, where they used to mint coins that had Liberty caps on them. We're in a basement with Liberty cap mushrooms now, and it smells of honey. Now, honey is used to preserve magic mushrooms, right? You don't want them to dry out too much. You don't want the psilocybin molecules inside to degrade, so you can preserve it by sticking it in honey. And that's and it's useful for transportation and preservation. Honey is also spirit food par excellence as an offering to give to gods, goddesses, spirits, ghosts, energetic, non-corporeal entities that you're looking to communicate with. Honey is great. It's super high energy. It's natural. It comes from this almost impossible process that the equally alien intelligence of a bee is making. The process by which a bee, and by which the individual organisms of the bee kind of sacrifice freedom or develop a higher form of freedom in order to produce this stuff that is literally that humans just kind of steal and farm and stick on their toast. Second mention for toast in this episode. Total coinkydink. Or are they? Honey is good for that. Honey is basically like one of nature's miracles. Yeah, super duper duper high sugar, super sweet. It's like nature's given treat. It just happens in this way, which is really miraculous. And then when you understand it, it's even more miraculous. So honey's really good. Now, this is a leap, and you're going to hate me for this, but if I was going to say about one other thing that happened within this triangle of space where Liberty Square, which is a shopping mall and a horrible skyscraper full of financial institutions like in that big skyscraper, the United Methodist Church on Arch Street, which is actually on Broad Street, but is like a nice woke church built by an old Quaker. And the kind of the first ever mint in America, which is the old Philadelphia Mint. If there was another thing which happened there, I'm really sorry again. Another thing which happened there was Lovecraft, whose fiction we are in this issue right at the moment. He had his honeymoon there. I would guarantee that within a 5-minute, 10-minute walk of where this scene is taking, H.P. Lovecraft lost his virginity. It's all a bit much. It's all a bit synchronicities piling in. It's all a bit honey. Now, when he was getting married, he'd just been given a contract from Harry Houdini, and that's a weird one, isn't it? Lovecraft wasn't a famous, particularly well-known writer. Harry Houdini was one of the most famous men in the world, and he liked Lovecraft writing enough to commission him, via the editor of Weird Tales, whatever his name was, Hornsberger or something. He had commissioned Lovecraft with like $100 or something. It was like $1,000 in today's money, to ghostwrite this adventure of Harry Houdini. This adventure made up short story about about Harry Houdini's adventures in Egypt. Lovecraft lost the manuscript on the way to getting married in New York. He has still got married. He went to his honeymoon in Philadelphia, and he had to rewrite the entire story from scratch, from memory, while he was on his honeymoon. Merely the first thing that he did to piss off his wife, Sonia. That story, what's it called? Let's check it out. It's called Imprisoned with the Pharaohs. This is in 1924, it was published. Basically, that story involves Harry Houdini going on an adventure to the Great Pyramid at Giza, which, if you remember, was the first image that appeared in any of these Invisibles comics. Houdini goes there, gets lost in the pyramid, goes underground, sees loads of like undead pharaohs, kind of from ancient Egypt, sees the Sphinx, or at least the Sphinx's paw, and then he sort of wakes up, or he runs away. He escapes. He is Harry Houdini after all. And the big monster at the end of Yeats's The Second Coming, where we get this phrase, things fall apart from, that's the Sphinx as well, isn't it? So there's this ridiculously arcane, Lovecraftian, Egyptian Illuminoid magic knot happening in these 3 pages of comic, which is so tied up in invisibility, and you can only kind of find by not looking very carefully in my characteristic fashion. that it all just seems a little bit weird. And I don't really know what it's trying to say, other than that maybe there is a clear signposting of not even narratives, but just of symbols, just of motifs appearing beneath the surface of this super fun adventure comic that is designed to be read in a certain way, or enjoyed in a certain way. People who are in the know, which is after all what Illuminati shit is all about, right? Or Masonic shit or whatever. You're meant to be able to pick it apart. And it takes us to Harry Houdini, who also had a run-in with, what's his name? House on the Borderland, Hodgson. He had a run-in with Houdini too, but Hodgson totally owned him. I'll get to that another day. Let's not go down that digression just yet. But Houdini was he was obviously a spy. He was obviously super, super duper bright. He travelled the whole world, super famous, super wealthy, died in a dumb way, which was so dumb it could have been an assassination, let's be honest. And his favourite author was Lovecraft. Lovecraft was obviously a psychic in tune with potentially alien intelligences, or maybe it was just, octopus intelligences. Cuttlefish. It really makes me wonder. Basically, I don't know why Houdini was so interested in Lovecraft. I don't know how Lovecraft and Yeats managed to write the same story about the Sphinx within 5 years of each other. Yeats was obviously an initiate he was in the kind of the vulgar Illuminati of his day, as is well known. I just think it's really weird, and I uncovered all this while I was doing the research for this here issuesode, and I was hoping that it would all get tied up in a bow in my head, in a neat way, but it doesn't. It's not neat. It's just really strange, really suggestive, really weird, and infuriatingly bizarre that there's a story about the Sphinx, and Lovecraft and Houdini and Yeats were all writing it within 5 years of each other, and then Morrison decides to reference it here. I don't know why he'd bother, unless it's about something, yeah. Okay, let's pause there. But not for too long, because we genuinely wanted this one to be a quick episode, and I've been going for an hour already, and I've done 3 pages. That's right, 3 pages. So let's get into it for real. Coming out of the flashback, we've got Mob's face. He's looking all kind of like moody and just been in a flashbacky. They're talking about Jack having met his finger. Jack is really they've got a bottle of iodine with them because of course they have. Jack is cross because he lost his finger, and he's really cross, and it's brilliant, frankly. Jack's we like Jack when he's kind of having one of his moody rants, and it kind of makes it's great. They're all meant to be rebels, but this one is too much of a handful even for them. There's a great panel here when he's cross about his finger, which has just been eaten by Orlando. There's a great panel, it's sore and he's angry about it, and there's these kind of lightning bolts and exclamation marks and explosions and stars kind of jumping out of it, and he's and it means something. This stump, he's not going to stand for it, and he's like, he's been with them for 10 minutes. He's lost a finger. These people, they ain't it. You don't want to be there. So that's all good now, and then they're being spied upon by the soldiers, the Myrmidons. Have we heard about them yet? No, we haven't heard about them yet. That's in a couple of pages. They're being watched by soldiers with primitive 90s night vision goggles. It's very good. They're waiting for Orlando to soften up the targets before they move in, and they're all like, and they're not like they're not like Cypher Men. They're more like the guys at the end of issue 4 who got blown up in the Invisible classroom. like SAS guys, good old boys, kind of asshole soldiers basically. Just remember what they did to our lads in Soho. Think about Corporal Brewster lying there, blind, trying to hold his guts in place with what was left of his hands. Think about that. So these guys are kind of like realer guys than the Cyphermen have been. So we've got to remember that when we're not dealing with, ancient phantasms in days of yore, there are real people being dealt with and dealing with, rather, the Invisibles situation. Corporal Brewster, it's kind of he was obviously one of the guys who we saw at the end of issue 4 and got blown up by the grenade. I'm not making it up. Look, Corporal Brewster is in big, bold. It's in bold. It's emphasised within this captain's whatever speech balloon. Corporal Brewster is a weird reference as well, right? So, because Arthur Conan Doyle, Sherlock Holmes, he wrote a play in 1907, a one-act play about a woman who is kind of like umming and ahhing about whether to marry this kind of soldier, and she goes to see her great uncle, and it's set in like the end of the 19th century, published around the year 1907. It's called Waterloo, because her great uncle fought at Waterloo and he's still alive, even though he's like 90 odd years old. He's very old, and he's called Corporal Brewster. And he, in the play, she basically learns that it's okay to be in love with this younger soldier that she's in love with, because her great uncle was a man, although he's a man who's kind of damaged by his experiences and by time and by trauma, obviously, of war. He, it's very kind of pre-World War One, and the sun hasn't set on the Empire yet, and it's all very, militaristic, kind of, in that kind of Victorian-y sort of way. And it's, and she kind of, her granduncle is an old war hero. He fought at Waterloo. He fought at the famous kind of, an act of heroism. He kind of like battled through some fire or something to in the defence of Hougoumont Farm. Hougoumont Farm is one of like the kind of the linchpin kind of areas of Waterloo, the battlefield that the British kind of held, and that was kind of key in maintaining strategic control of the battlefield. So Corporal Brewster, whose guts were blown out in Soho, was also at Waterloo. Who else was at Waterloo? The Voltigeurs were at Waterloo, about a mile away from Hougoumont Farm, in another farmhouse or building called Plancenoit Farm. Is it Plancenoit? Is Plancenoit Farm? It's probably not much else apart from farms around there, is there? Yeah, let's call it a farm. But yeah, so while Corporal Brewster was doing acts of heroism, the Voltigeurs, although they were overcome by the Prussians eventually, a small unit of Voltigeurs held off a very large Prussian farm, and although eventually they had to surrender, they there were heroes on both sides on that day, like another war you might be able to think of. And so that's weird too, right? This military building of states, this kind of settlement of European nations, this myth building, these images of soldiers who go on to become myths somehow, and around them we build our understandings of nations and people and kind of the administration and kind of politics of these post-Napoleonic modern states. They're still here. They're still in this windmill. They're still in this comic. There was a windmill at Waterloo as well, by the way, given that we've been thinking from issues and issues about why there's a windmill, why the time machine is a windmill. There was a windmill at Waterloo, and Wellington observed the battlefield from there. It was a couple of days before the actual battle. It was like Ligny rather than Waterloo, but it's basically just Waterloo. So these places are kind of, these people and these words, these random little words that keep jumping out of the text. They're in there. They are in there. So we're building, this is kind of one of the things that the Invisibles is about, right? It's about building Blairism, as it would become, as it was becoming into like a cultural register that we can understand. And the Invisibles is doing very subtle work to rearrange some of the building blocks of what we think the modern state should be. Blairism, better than Thatcherism. Not different enough to Thatcherism, but better than Thatcherism. At least they spent money on hospitals and that, even if it was like debt money rather than real money. But yeah, this is kind of laying the ground. This is kind of doing work that's going to over-establish, let's be honest, a new kind of social settlement, certainly within the UK, and more broadly across like the Western Atlantic powers. Yeah, it's not a terribly anti-establishment text, The Invisibles. Okay, let's be quite clear about that as we're doing this reread. It flips between both modes quite definitely. On the next page, we've got an advert. It's another Sam Goody advert. Have you seen the new season of Stranger Things? There's a Sam Goody in there, and I was like, I know what that is because I read old comics from the 90s with adverts with Sam Goody in them. Sam Goody, record shops, obs. This is an advert like they have these adverts for these records, and we like talking about them, don't we? This is the two albums in this month's advert are Ball Hog or Tugboat by Mike Watt and Texas Sugar Strat Magic by the Chris Duarte group. Ball Hog or Tugboat, it's interesting, right? This is all like post-Kurt American rock. The Mike Watt record is specifically post-Kurt grunge. It's like a kind of it's not even a super group, but Mike Watt was like it's like a bassist for a load of like alt rock bands in the kind of around the Pacific Northwest, but kind of in America, should we say? Presumably a very nice guy, because when he was struck out on his own to do a solo album, everybody contributed to his album. Literally everybody you can think of who's in 90s alt rock plays an instrument on this album, Ball Hog or Tugboat. Mike Watt is a bassist. He was in loads of bands, and there's that kind of horrible funk rock edge to some of it. That like slappy, like Red Hot Chili Peppers thing, which kind of is awful. And a lot of the album kind of tends to go into these kind of slightly like funky workouts, which don't sound very good. And then at the end, he gets in like the organ player from Parliament Funkadelic, and they do like a cover version of Maggot Brain, and it is written. Suddenly, it's really good. It took me a couple of listens to be like, is this genius or is this awful? It's genius. It's really, really good. There's another track on the album called Against the 70s. The kids of today should defend themselves against the 70s, which is one of the best songs. It's got Eddie Vedder on lead vocals. It's one of the best songs that America produced during the grunge period at all. Good advice then and now and then. In the 70s, in the 90s, and indeed today, the kids should defend themselves against the 70s. Ball Hog or Tugboat. There's some kind of like hilarious like bawdy humour in kind of in and around the record. But it's worth a listen. It's worth a listen. It's an interesting record with some standout numbers on it. On the other hand, the Chris Duarte group, Texas Sugar Strat Magic, is not. I got 2 tracks in. It's really boring, like good old boy, Texas rock, basically. It's really not good fun. I'm sorry to mention the Red Hot Chili Peppers twice, but he hasn't even got his own name, like Texas Sugar Strat Magic. It took me a while to work out why the name was so crap. It's like a riff on Blood Sugar Sex Magic, the really big Red Hot Chili Peppers record from a couple of years before. This guy Chris Duarte, he hasn't even got his own name for his album. Never mind his own sound or anything. Yeah, it's awful. Hated it. Over the page. Jack's still ranting. King Mob is coming out of thought. He's telling him about John O' Dreams. Yeah, I wonder what did they do to him? Did they fucking cut his dick off and eat that? We were in Philadelphia tracking down a stolen artifact, something called the Hand of Glory. So that's how we know from a few pages ago that it was the Hand of Glory. Sorry for jumping ahead for a bit. He is slowly working out that They are, like I've been saying, they're being tracked down by Orlando and Co. a little bit too easily. So it's likely that somebody has been, someone is telling on them, is giving away their secrets, including the codes to the time machine. Da 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 da. I was a gibbering idiot for a month. John O'Dreams was, well, they took him through the fracture. We found a prototype community, people who'd changed. So is this the mushroom people? Did they find something else down there? Yeah, I mean, I thought that the Migo stroke elder things were containing kind of extraterrestrial or extra dimensional kind of things in them, but maybe not. Maybe it was just people trying to grow themselves Yuggoth-oid bodies. I don't know. They'd opened a fracture. There was a fracture underneath that church anyway, and they opened it using the Hand of Glory holes and sex magic, right? Like strap magic. And Dane's like, I don't care. And they're like trying to work out who the traitor is. I think we know that it's not King Mob. I think by now, if you've got any instinct for sort of like, genre storytelling, you know that although he's annoying and wrong a lot of the time, King Mob isn't bad. We're meant to think he's great. Whether we do or not, we're meant to think he's great. And he's not a betray kind of a character. If you were reading these pages closely, you'd probably notice the way that Robin is standing apart from the rest of the group during this moment where they're talking about who might be betraying them, and it would be like she's betraying them. But maybe she's just standing apart because she's getting her psychic early warning, because she's found out that she's registered that the Myrmidons, the guys outside, the SAS guys, are coming. Dane's like, don't care, I'm leaving the band. And this is where the things fall apart, splitting the part, stroke breaking up the band theme of this issue comes in again. Jack's like, I'm done with it. Like, I really like the way that he's like, no. And when I say no, I mean it. No, I'm not hanging out with you guys. I don't like you. I don't like what you do. I don't like hanging out with you. It's no fun. I got drunk. That was all right. Went back in time. That was awful. Got my finger eaten. That was terrible. And they're like, uh-oh, baddies are coming. Da-da-da. Fanny gets her lipstick out because, even in the middle of a potential gunfight, you've got to look fabulous, and she does. Oh, this is a terrible place to get pinned down. Wellington didn't think so. If we can get down to the cars, we might have a better chance of this. Jack hears that. Oh yeah, over the page, another advert. So I've been quite enjoying the White Wolf Publishing adverts, as you know. This one is probably the worst designed page I've ever read. You can't read any of the writing in the advert. It's really, really, really badly put together. The one bit you can read, so there's Hougoumont advert. There's another, the City of Darkness. There's another San Francisco-based young gothic novel, young short stories kind of thing. There's a thing about a vampire slayer who's a vampire from Nancy Collins, Sonia Blue. She didn't become as famous as Buffy, did she? But it's interesting that these kind of things, vampire slayers who had superpowers, were kind of in the wind a bit. The only bit that you can read is the blurb for Caravan of Shadows. Is a full-length original novel based on White Wolf Game Studios' Wraith, the Oblivion setting. So it's kind of based on an RPG. It's like the plot of this movie, of this book, is for boxer Joey Costello, Afterlife is a nightmare of slavery and savage gladiatorial combat, as he and his master become members of a travelling troupe that is part of an underworld boxing circuit. So what happens when you die? You become a boxer. Okay. The lovely impresario of the troupe has problems of her own, secrets which make her a target for a sinister collection of spectres, vampires, psychics, and exorcists. Soon Joey and his companions are running for their lives in a desperate odyssey that takes them across America and into the hellish dimensions that lie beyond the earth. It sounds, I don't know, is that the best? Does that sound amazing, or does that sound awful? I'm going to go with awful, but, each to their own. I don't know how this advert connects to the rest of this issue, other than that, like I say, it's kind of 90s, and the graphic design is really terrible. It's really terrible. King Mob's like, right, don't worry, at least I've got a gun. Uh-oh, no, where's my gun? Hang on, Jack's got it. Get after him. I'm on it. Diddle-diddle. As you can tell, the pace of this issue has really started to pick up now. We are really going for it. King Mob makes a producer's reference. Boy, when things go wrong. I think that's the bit where the guy is trying to commit suicide or something, but the gun jams. And it's the guy who wrote the script, right? The kind of the weird Nazi like fanboy who's written a script about how great Hitler is. And this is how King Mob rolls, right? He makes jokes, inappropriate jokes at inappropriate times. Jack has nicked King Mob's anarcho-fabulous black Lambo and has legged it. Boy spots him. She runs back up and goes, "He's not your car." And King Mob's like, "No, a bomb's going to go off in my car in 5 minutes if it's a security measure if you don't enter a code." Stupid. But good for a bit of like dramatic tension at this point. That's fine. They're heading this way. They come up with a plan. Can they? What are they going to do? Remember, we're reminded of Orlando's knife and his coat. It's a white jacket, not the first white jacket we've seen in this episode. And King Mob's mind, he's great. You know, you like him a lot at this point. He's about to get into a big old ruck, and he's kind of leading. He's kind of taking control in like a charismatic way, and whinging about it, about how kind of awful the situation is. And he looks cool. And you know, is he going to live up to his own hype now? Let's find out in a few pages. Car chase. Jack runs through a blockade. What's the word? Barricade? Like a traffic block. Yeah, a roadblock. He charges through it, but they shoot at him. They take out the tyres. He goes off the road into a field, crashes through a fence, and stacks it into a tree. Soldier guy is meanwhile back in the windmill. Goes up to the bit of the windmill where they are with a couple of other soldiers. And Orlando, is back on his feet. Obviously, it's not Orlando; it's King Mob. But they don't know the difference between Orlando and King Mob. Even when he so they think he's Orlando, so they get close to him. He turns around, stabs them. Boy hops up, does some judo, some karate. King Mob nicks their gun, kills 2. So they've killed 3 baddies, maybe 4. Yeah, they've downed 3 baddies at least, in double quick time. And it's like, oh, hang on a minute, these guys are really good at what they're doing. But do you remember how Orlando, we said he was exercised, yeah? Remember how it was kind of neatly woven into the plot, or into the action rather. But Jack had to sacrifice a finger. Fanny had to sacrifice her tits. They pinned him to wood with steel. He was in a magic circle already. The whole thing felt like they were kind of exercising a demon. Now it feels like they've kind of entered the next phase of this kind of like night-long mega ritual where King Mob has actually taken the spirit of Orlando into himself. He's used it to defeat the soldiers, frankly, and also we know what else Orlando does. Orlando builds new worlds. Orlando's a symbol that militaristic nations use to form themselves around, right? So is King Mob going to be that? Is that where his story lies? The soldiers are checking out Dane in the car. He crawls away. Oh, he's a bit knocked around from the crash, but he's all right. They catch him. Wait, stand up. Boom! The car blows up. He just gets knocked into a stream. It's all very quick. Back at the scenes are flipping really well in these like 2-page spreads, but there's 2 pages take seconds to read. The structure of the issue is fantastic. Back at the windmill, it's on fire. Oh no! King Mob has taken on a second disguise, and he uses it again to let one of the soldiers get close. Douches him in the face with this little Uzi with its ribbed stock. Takes out a couple more soldiers. While he's doing that, Robin gets the car, runs over a couple more soldiers, and it's all going the hell off, quite frankly. Dane didn't get blown up, but even he runs into a soldier. But remember, he's got King Mob's gun, and this soldier who stops him, you're well and truly fucked. Nice try, son. But Jack, he's got very good at shooting in the past hour or so. Boom. He pulls King Mob's gun straight out, and boom, there it goes. Tank Girl advert. Tank Girl movie was around, remember? So we've got Peter Milligan and Jamie Hewlett doing a Tank Girl The Odyssey road trip. Peter Milligan can't help himself when it comes to a little bit of James Joyce. He loves it. I haven't read this one. I suspect it's okay. Is that Jamie? That's got to be Bolin. Yeah, that's Brian Bolin drawing this advert though. It's nice to see him sort of trying to ape like the soft line anarchy of Jamie Hewlett style. He does not a bad job of it, you have to say. I haven't read this. I wonder how it is. Might be really good. Might be really meh. I don't like Jamie Hewlett's art as much as some. Britain's cult anti-heroine is taking a little trip to America. It hardly goes without saying, or at least it shouldn't really need to be said, that she's basically King Mob with tits, or King Mob without tits is basically Tank Girl, if you know what I mean. Obviously, she came first and has got more heft. She's got her own film. But yeah, there's even like Judy and Jax and stuff, which would become a thing. Back in the car, the King Mob is going woohoo, because they're completely kicking ass. They're completely wiping out all of these highly trained soldiers who are after them. A couple more go down. King Mob's making loads of jokes. They find the wreckage of the King Mob's car and the wreckage of the soldiers who are kind of inspecting it as it blew up. King Mob's making loads of jokes still. Join the army and see the cemetery. Boy tells him off for making these jokes. Because, you know, she's kind of sensitive and he's kind of an asshole and he's exulting in all of this carnage a little bit too much. But so are we. So are you, right? This is cool issue fun. This is like, and then we've got like an advert for like what looks to be like an AMA of DC Comics Online via America Online. Peter David, Chris Claremont, John Byrne, Paul Kupperberg, and William Mesner Loeb, who I haven't heard of for a long time. But I hope he's all right. He was ill, wasn't he? I hope he's all right because I didn't hate his comics. But yeah, like it's basically they took a whole page of an issue to do an advertising AMA of some comic book writers, as if don't worry about it, guys. In 20 years' time, you won't be able to move for annoying comic book writers on the internet. I mean, seriously. So Jack's got away. There's fire going off. The action's kind of over, but the flames are still burning. They need to find Jack because he's legged it again. And King Mob states, I need to call Mr. Six. So we'll see more of that in a moment. Back here, look at that. Final page. See, I told you we could rip through this bit. Very good between the eyes bullet there from Jack. He is a good shot now all of a sudden, but he doesn't like it. He's had a very stressful night. And, he's kind of done a very big sort of loss of innocence thing here. He's basically a nice lad. He didn't want to take someone's life, but he has. And obviously he's going to deal with that. And that's the end of the issue. Like the change of gears is fab, Jill Thompson is not like renowned as like an action artist, but she does it brilliantly. She's just a really great cartoonist and she's really good at, she just kind of gets it, right? She just understands that there's a certain way that you can do rhythm in pages, and Morrison's good at thumbnailing these things. We've seen what his process is like. He kind of sketches stuff out, but she knows when to do a lot of detail. She knows when to do not too much. She knows how to make various kind of like lines of sight, like and angles in a little panel here feel really kind of crunchy and cool. It's a great issue, a great just sort of fighting comic issue. With loads of snappy one-liners and kind of like, inappropriate black comedy, which is good. We're into the letters page. I don't know if we're going to do the letters page, man. I want to kind of get this done in the next few minutes. It'd be great to get this issue this issue-sode in at 90 minutes, wouldn't it? Schoolgirls torch teach, fiends laugh as she turns into a fireball. The Sun, January 24th, 1995. Quote of the month, courtesy of Britain's liveliest newspaper. He says a nice thing about Jill Thompson. Dennis Kramer says goodbye to them. This is their last issue on The Invisibles. For a while, she definitely comes back, so don't worry, because she has been fantastic. She is one of the definitive artists of this series, and, kind of a very stylish woman who is basically Ragged Robin. And she's definitely somebody who belongs in this comic. It's and we'll look forward to her coming back. Next up, they've got Chris Weston doing the guest art for the next issue. That's going to be fun. Brian Mercer, who was clever enough to withhold his address, gets the first letter. He spotted an Invisibles poster in the background of Roseanne. It was on The Big Breakfast. For a comic, it did pop up. It wasn't... For a comic which is all about how I'm really edgy and, the straights aren't going to like me, The Invisibles did pop up here and there. It did get some attention. Just because of the swearing? Or maybe people wanting to give it attention. I don't know. Westchester, Jay McIntyre from Westchester. West Charlie Chester gets the next letter. Westchester, Pennsylvania. Jay makes a really good point in this letter. He says that we're X issues in now. Don't know anything about who the main characters are. So what's going on? And Morrison gives him a really clear answer. King Mob is a master assassin, yes. Ragged Robin and Lord Fanny are both witches, for want of a better word. Boy is a martial arts expert and otherwise quite normal. And Jack Frost is more important than anyone is even aware. He's not going to tell you much more about Jack, because obviously finding out about Jack is kind of the point of the comic. This first year of the book has been set up as a rapid tour around the world of the Invisibles. Wasn't that rapid, was it? It was a bit kind of coach-bound for 4 issues there. The opening story arc, for instance, showed the induction of a new member. The second concentrated on an atypical team mission, and the next 3 one-off issues will shine spotlights on various other aspects of the capital C conspiracy before we return to the trials and tribulations of King Mob's team. The second year will feature interlinking stories focusing on each of the core cast in turn. You should know them all fairly intimately, but then, great. Thank you for A, telling us who the characters are and what their magic powers are, and B, telling us what the structure that's planned is, and what we can look forward to for the next few issues. Because it's good to know, right? It makes you feel a bit stable. We've seen that we can get stuck into these fairly kind of convoluted and intense kind of psycho-historical drama things, and we've seen that we can have just like flat out fun action and adventure issues. But to know that there's like a path for this is really encouraging. Next letter, Mark J. Kulak, cool surname, from Nanticoke, Pennsylvania. Is it a good letter? Is it a good letter? No, it's quite a boring letter. He does ask whether Morrison is Shelley or Byron, given, as from the debates that we've had in the previous issues. The Shelley-Byron debates, this is Morrison's answer, the Shelley-Byron debate surprised me because I started out on Shelley's side but ended up siding with Byron. Some combination of both would seem to be the sanest response to living and dying in the modern world, whether that's the modern world of 1818 or 1995, which is a kind of a boring centrist, but sort of, I guess, fairly, difficult to argue with point. But I felt the cultural walkthrough of the Arcadia storyline, this is Morrison still, was necessary in order to set up the historical and thematic framework of the series, but I agree with you that it's time to spill some innards. Which is why the next major storyline will be pushing our heroes to the physical and emotional limit. Great. Next letter, Daniel Kelly, Ontario. Talking about the French Revolution issue. Says you should have Gilles de Rais in The Invisibles. I don't like Dane either. Why? Who cares whether you like a character or not? Don't be silly. Morrison's response is quite good. Lovable old Gilles de Rais, rapist, child murderer, necrophile, black magician, ... He was all those things and more. It's interesting that we're still talking about, like, French knights who were involved in battling for the identity of the French nation, though, isn't it? Georges Bataille's book on Gilles de Rais is a really cracking read. If you like, your sort of if you like your serial killer true crime books to come with, like, an extra bit of slightly cracked, like, modernist psychoanalytic transgressive philosophy, which you should. Next letter, final letter, Alex Hutchinson, 210 Glen. Sorry, he's from Melbourne, Australia. This is a boring letter too. It's kind of included to give Morrison a bit of a chance to whinge about the censorship in the previous issue. Do you remember I said I wasn't, I don't really care what the censorship was. I think basically it was to make some of the bits in the Castle of Silling sequences seem a bit less like children were involved. I mean, is it that important to have it in? I don't know. Morrison's like, well, I get paid, and I'm not really pushing the boundaries. It's a boring note, and he Morrison whinges about it a little bit. Stuart, what's his name? The editor, Stuart Rottenberg. No, that's not right. Stuart Moore pops up to kind of go, well, just to give you the editorial side of the argument. We have to be confident we can stand behind the material, especially when it's of a controversial nature and might cause a risk to stores that support us. That's true. Like if you've got like comic shops have been closed down for less than that. God, we know they have. This is only a few years after the Lord Horror thing, and that's why. And with that's why Morrison has probably taken it on the chin with a whinge. Those of us, this is Morrison, those of us who have elected to work with big companies as opposed to the small press can only push at the barriers. I don't think we can be expected to represent the cutting edge of comics. Let's face it, even the best of the mainstream mature comics are simply glorified superhero comics. That's okay, I'm very fond of superheroes, and I like to see having them done with a little wit and intelligence. So yes, of course. That's it. Next issue, Zombies Got Crazy. Voodoo Rap and Scorpion Gods meet Haitian invisible Jim Crow in the Season of Ghouls. So yeah, get your cultural appropriation pants on for that. The subscribe to Vertigo advert is a lovely preacher picture from Steve Dillon, much missed RIP. We're at the point where, in the issue where the adverts are tending to talk more about the next issue than this one. And so it is coming to your town. And Morrison's already told us that he's doing a tour of the Invisibles universe next, and that kind of fits with this, the kind of the road trip or coming to your town vibe. On the Ledge, the editorial is by Paul Jenkins. He's the comic book writer, Paul Jenkins. He's just about to take over Hellblazer for a run that I do not remember. He's got a not bad editorial about complaining about the SES laws of the 80s and the Criminal Justice Bill. Could go into that, actually. Yeah, like there's a long arc of highly repressive legislation in the UK that kind of, the most famous recent iteration, there's probably been tens as I started podcasting, but the most famous recent iteration of that would be the stop and search laws as they're exercised in certain cities, and disproportionately against like black and brown boys. Obviously it's not cool. Yeah, good little editorial by Paul Jenkins. I agree with him. I didn't read his comics. On the coming out soon, or coming out this month, Preacher's up to number 3. Tank Girl, we saw the advert for that. Goddess, we saw the advert for that. Paul Jenkins' run on Hellblazer starts with our cover artist Sean Phillips. Yeah. Also, Kill Your Boyfriend. Kill Your Boyfriend is another Grant Morrison comic. I remember it very fondly. It's kind of like it's a bit like Bonnie and Clyde, but set in 90s Britain. And it's kind of like a spin-off, there's a 23 again, but like, as I said, when you put it in, it doesn't really, when you come across it, it messes your head. When you know that a guy's putting it in on purpose, the effect is slightly lessened, I'm afraid. Wayward kids with nowhere to go, doomed love, on the run and out of control, teenage romance plus rebellion plus random violence equals Kill Your Boyfriend by Grant Morrison and Philip Bond. Yeah, I remember this very fondly. I haven't read it for a long time. I love Philip Bond's art. He draws like the inside of my teenage mind. We have here a love heart, sticking your V's up, a gun, and another love heart with a knife through it. We've got a magic bus, which takes us back to all of the Ken Kesey stuff we were talking about in the previous issuesode. We've got like a sexy girl with a gun and a bottle of vodka with a hammer and sickle on it. It's all good. We might do a spin-off episode of this about Kill Your Boyfriend. It would make sense to. They're very it's very of a piece with the Invisibles. And on the back page, we've got an advert for the album Mad Season by the band. No. Yeah, the band is Mad Season and the album is Above. Lane Staley from Alice in Chains and a bunch of his mates. Another sort of grunge goth supergroup. Great cover. I really like that. It looks like Mark Hempel, but it's not. I think it's Lane Staley drew it. Like I say, from Alice in Chains. It's a good album. I quite enjoyed it. Good singing on it. A bit long. A couple of the tracks are a bit pointless, but I enjoyed the good singing and the nice lyrics. Kind of gothy, goth grunge. You know, nothing to get too excited about, but it was all right. And a good cover. The Americans are hurting at this point. In June '95, like the American rock scene is really struggling to deal with its Kurt loss. They are going into rehab a lot. They're forming super groups to like affirm bonds of community with one another, and they're producing some interesting music. Fair play to them. I hope they get through it all. I hope American rock survives. That's it. That is the shortest episode. We made it, guys. Please, I'm going to stop talking about it now. We've got doing an episode next month as per, but because this issue including and the next 4 issues are all and the next 3 issues are all like one shots. They don't come in arcs. This episode and the next 3 are going to go free within 1 month of publication. So if you're on Patreon, please keep subscribing. Please keep subscribing, for goodness sake. And you'll get this, but you won't have to wait 4 months for them to go free onto the YouTube channel. It will happen within a month. So there'll be more Invisible podcast content for you free watchers. Give me $1. It's only kind of $1. Thanks very much. And yeah, more stuff to come. I'm going to read it out again because it's pretty awful, isn't it? Zombies go crazy. Voodoo Rap and Scorpion Gods meet Haitian Invisible Jim Crow in the Season of Ghouls. And we're going to do that in a month's time in the next episode. Thanks ever so much for watching. Call me an idiot on @BobsyMinus on Twitter. Follow the Diane Twitter as well. Support patreon.com/Diane podcast to get access to these issues early and all of the other Diane goodies. And obviously catch me doing Shadow Trap stuff, doing Diane stuff. It's all going off, bruv. I hope you enjoyed the time. It was short. It was short. Bye.